We want to make sure that we give authentic Sri Lankan hospitality to the world with style and elegance. And I think with Cinnamon Life, the exciting challenge is this is something that the country hasn't seen. This is not just very unique to Sri Lanka. I've been in many, many countries. I can say like this, that when the day that Cinnamon Life opens, it will be the biggest opening of a hotel in the world. That's for sure. That's quite a big statement, but I believe it. So in other words, that property on that day, the biggest opening of a property that size and caliber.
Mikael Svensson is Chief Executive of Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts. Mikael, welcome to Echelon's Turning Point, and we're here to discuss how to reset Sri Lanka's post-crisis tourism product. Mikael Svensson, great to have you on Echelon's Turning Point, and let's start this conversation here. So we're at the cusp of what appears to be a turnaround. You mentioned you took up a position in this country several years ago.
Yes.
And it's been a rocky ride since, and maybe you are about to see the end of that, right? You are at the helm of a large portfolio of properties, most of them owned by the operator.
That's right.
Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts. So there's several aspects to consider there.
There's the owner and the manager.
Owner
Both
and the
headaches.
manager, both hands, right? How does one go about sort of prepping and strategizing for what's ahead right now?
Yeah, I think first of all, when I arrived, it was just after the Easter bombings. And, since then, I certainly didn't realize in Cinnamon as a country as a whole that there were going to be a couple of more bumps in the road, right, with COVID. And then on top of that, the economic crisis. So most countries actually have had to deal just with COVID.
Sure.
In some ways, though, it prepped us well to be able to prepare for when crises hit. And so when COVID came, I kind of took the stance, which was, how do you best take advantage of a crisis? Because often when you get into a situation like that, you panic or you start to scramble and you start to look at ways and means and what you need to do for the now. But the positive is that if there is one, is that you get time to reassess your business. And what we did was really looking at what do we do to realign our business? How do we become more efficient? Where can we multitask? And how can we restructure the hotels and the organization as a whole, so that when we come out of that, not only are we better prepared for post-COVID in this case, but also as an industry, because I think Sri Lanka, that's what's happened, is that we have had a tendency to be very people heavy in our hospitality industry and not necessarily as efficient, as effective.
Okay.
So
Sure.
that was sort of the main position that I took, was to take advantage of this time. Didn't know it was going to be that long, but to reposition ourselves.
So in a sense, with the benefit of hindsight, you prepped yourself for this long downturn rather early and rather well.
Absolutely. As I said, if there is a pause in business, and there literally was, I've never in my 30 plus years in the industry had a situation where hotels practically close down and the industry practically closes down. And hopefully we'll never see that again. So how do you take advantage of that in realigning the business? So that's where we're at now.
Sure. And now you've had time to consider this. So it's been apparent that there could be, a turnaround. The first green shoots of this turnaround are very apparent around us right now in hospitality and tourism. As a leader, what's the tone and message you're putting out there for your teams about the shape and form of this turnaround for Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, for me, it's always to translate positivity, right? And to tell people, and Sri Lankans are extremely resilient. So even in bad times and in tough times, fortunately, they have a very resilient spirit. And what I'm saying is that as this business is rebounding, as tourism is starting to come in, we can't sit back and just look at arrival numbers and say that, oh, well, we're increasing so much, or we have reach the numbers of 18, 19, or whatever the parameters may be. But we need to take a proactive approach here and drive this rebound.
Sure.
Because otherwise, we'll just be at the mercy of arrivals coming in. And those arrival numbers look very, very different than they did pre-COVID and that they've done in Sri Lanka in the past. So it's now about my message to the team and to the organization is, how do we position our properties? How do we align our properties? Because tourism has also changed. I mean, it has changed for quite some time. But if you look at Sri Lanka, I believe that we had hotels that were based simply on 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. It wasn't about what is this particular property offering to a particular guest that's looking for that.
Right.
So I think that's really where we are now, is to say each of our properties that we have, 15 strong plus Cinnamon Life, obviously, as well as Cinnamon and Candy opening. How do we want to position those, and who is our target market, and what differentiates one from the other? And not just saying we have a bunch of 5-star properties, come and stay with us, because the customer is not like that. They demand more these days.
Sure. So how have you gone about doing this? Have you started a process to differentiate the experiences guests can get around these things? Do you target different expectations, different kinds of guests from different regions, different age groups? In a very practical sense, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's absolutely how you do it. It's quite complicated because you have to look at it from different perspectives. If you just look at the market mix of people coming in, that drives a lot of those changes that you're looking at. Now, we have a huge influx of Russians coming in. Before that was China. They traditionally would stay maybe a night in Colombo and then do the round trip. Russians are not into that. They're going to the South Coast, and we can see that business, and they have a different way in which they look at their holidays and what they're looking for. But it was very apparent to me when I first arrived that the one thing that drives all of our properties is the destination and the experience that is in that destination. Unlike any other hotel group that I've certainly seen. And what I mean by that is that if you have, a Cinnamon Wild in Yala, people are going to Yala to go to the safari. They are not necessarily, as Cinnamon was positioned, not necessarily going to stay at Cinnamon Wild to add to that experience and to add to that destination. The same with Trinco, if they're going to see the whales and then they stay at Trinco Blue, or going even down the coastline or wherever it may be. So realignment to this is to see how can we get our product to be a part of the experience that they're going there for. And those are simple things. It's first and foremost about the service, right? Giving that we are a Sri Lankan company. We're the largest Sri Lankan hotel company. So we have a responsibility to emphasize and promote the Sri Lankan way, Sri Lankan tourism, which is actually at the fingertips of the people here. So that was sort of one aspect of it, is deliver and drive the service through our properties.
Sure.
And then looking at our F&B offerings and just looking at the finer touches. And we want to make sure that we give authentic Sri Lankan hospitality to the world with style and elegance. That's our sort of message, internally and externally.
You've got this overarching brand, Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts. It's underneath you have a diverse array of properties, right? You talked about how they're each different from the other in terms of the potential experience they can offer.
Yes.
Right? Do you feel you've sort of cracked it as of now about the unique identity of each of these? Do your potential guests understand what they're coming in?
It's a great question. I would say that we are on the path. We're on the journey of doing so. And it's as if you've read my notes in my previous workshop I just came from with the team, because this is really what we need to do. We do have a diverse offering, everything from very good 3-star properties, serviced type properties with select services in our red properties, and then obviously great hotels like Grand, Lakeside, and Bentota, and then just throw into that mix a $1.4 billion integrated resort as we're building with Cinnamon Life. So it is extremely diverse. And for a company that only has in existence 15 hotels, that can be very confusing. You're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. And what we need to do is to and we are on that journey to clearly identify what is different between a Hicka Trans by Cinnamon to a Cinnamon Grand to a Cinnamon Bentota, because to the person in Sweden, being Swedish, they wouldn't necessarily know. And then when you bring in an uber luxury product like Cinnamon Life, the pressure becomes even bigger, because now the brand is going to become extremely prominent worldwide very quickly. So that's sort of the line in the sand, is making sure that we are aligned to exactly what you were explaining by the time Life.
So in this transformation, if we can call it that, right?
Yeah.
What do you think are the most critical factors that will determine the level of its success? Is it branding? Is it people? Is it the experience? I'm sure you have one or two in mind that that you must get right.
Yeah.
What would those be?
Actually, it's a combination of those, but the first thing you need to get right is your people. That's always in whatever you do. If you think that you're going to have a reputation because you invest $1 billion into tangible asset, that's not going to get you very far as reputation is concerned. So people is everything. And by that, I mean focusing on training, focusing on motivating, focusing on retaining. I often say that as CEO, the sort of slash title I have is Chief Pride Officer. You need to give people pride every day with what you do. So that will go miles. And it's not that expensive, compared to trying to renovate and so forth. And, those given the times, those are more challenging right now as we speak, as we're coming out of this hole. So people is absolutely a number one. Experience is the other aspect of this, is managing the expectations of the guest that is coming to your hotel. That obviously service is one of those elements, but that doesn't mean, there's this preconceived idea that when you go and stay in a 5-star hotel that you're going to get a better experience. It's not necessarily true. You will get a different type of experience, but it needs to be very focused as to what you're trying to do. So that's really what my focus is making sure that we take care of our people, that they're happy where they're working, that they have good facilities where they're staying, they have great food, and they have good training opportunities and opportunities to progress in their careers. And remuneration and benefits that are there to support what they do.
You are in some ways captive to the Sri Lankan brand positioning, the destination marketing campaign, if you will, also, right? But that's only a component of how well the Sri Lankan brand is perceived or positioned. How well aligned or misaligned are these? Is it with Cinnamon's own expectation, own positioning, you think, and how? I'm assuming.
What do you mean, from a perspective of the industry, or?
So from a perspective of potential travelers to Sri Lanka, there is a certain destination marketing campaign,
Yes.
and a Sri Lankan brand positioning or perceived positioning in the minds of potential travelers.
Yes.
And there's a positioning you have for Cinnamon Life and the other resorts, 15 resorts that you already have. How well aligned are these? Do you think there is great opportunity for better alignment?
Absolutely. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that I think that there is a disalignment, and there has been more to the destination, the experience that people are coming to, and how they perceive Cinnamon within that choice. I think that in many destinations, perhaps, and that doesn't go just with Cinnamon, I think it goes across the board. This is something that we need to do as an industry. We need to hone in and really decide what is this property supposed to be giving to our guest. So I think there is a disalignment there, and it is the one area which we need to ensure that it aligns. Otherwise, the guest of today expects to have the destination being the experience, the location, and the hotel, and not just so. So we definitely have a ways to go. That Cinnamon is synonymous with the experience that they're coming in for. And let's not kid ourselves. People that come to Sri Lanka whether it be for the beaches or whether it be for round trip or whatever it may be, they are coming for the experience of Sri Lanka. They are not coming for anything else. And that's not to say that hotels is secondary by any means, but we then need to make sure that we fall into the main reason why people are traveling to our country. It's different if you're going to, I don't know, say Singapore, for example. You're not necessarily going there for the culture of Singapore, right? You're going there to experience whatever it is, or shopping and so forth and so on. And then your hotel becomes, maybe choice number one, because everybody's going there for
the same reason.
For the same reason, yeah.
When you look at how you want to sort of fix the brand, or not necessarily fix, but how you want to position the brand sharply, right? And you have several constraints. If people is one that you think is really important, do you feel Sri Lanka currently, after all it has been through, has the depth of talent that you need to run an operation as diverse as the one you have? Or would you feel that we need talent from overseas to make sure that we are able to deliver at least at the outset?
I'm really happy actually that you asked this question, because I was asked the same question about 4 years ago when I arrived, and saying, well, how do I feel we can develop a 5-star luxury product if we don't have the talent? But if you just look at the last year or so, and people who are migrating, they're not migrating to 3-star hotels. They're not migrating to 4-star hotels. They're going to the best hotels in the world,
right?
Whether it be in the Middle East, whether it be into Australia. Restaurants, I mean, we have chefs from Cinnamon that are going to Michelin star restaurants, to fantastic places throughout Europe, and even to the US. So back then, my answer was, I believe we have the talent. It's about leadership. That's where the crux is. It's about how do we lead and train and develop our people, and where do we set the bar? Where do we set the bar to the type of hospitality and service delivery that we say is 5-star, and challenge ourselves. And that's where I think, yes, a mix of international experience. I'm a big personal advocate of bringing these people, bringing Sri Lankans back that have worked around the world, and we've done so with many people that have worked overseas and come back. That's the best form, right? Because they're Sri Lankan, but they have had exposure, international exposure. So I think that's really kind of critical, is leading these group of people. Now, fast forward 4 years, slightly different answer to that question, because we do have a shortage of people. That's what it is. It's not a shortage of talent or an inability to deliver service at that level. We simply have a shortage of people, and we're not seeing a huge amount of hotels opening up. Obviously, 2-3 in the next year or so. But even so, with the current portfolio of hotels we have, not just Cinnamon, but throughout the country, there is a great shortage, and I don't believe that shortage is. I don't think we've hit the bottom of that, because we haven't come out of this. One of them is obviously what rates and how much revenues our hotels are bringing in, so that we can support higher salaries, so that people don't need to travel. I'd say 90% of everybody that migrates doesn't do so by choice necessarily. I mean, I don't know 90, 80, 70, but certainly at least half of them are not leaving because they want to necessarily. I think many would like to, if there was a slightly smaller gap, would want to stay in Sri Lanka, obviously.
That brings me back to something you mentioned at the outset. You said one of your early observations of Sri Lanka and Cinnamon perhaps was also that there was an opportunity to improve productivity, that you had too many people doing something, right? Can you explain for me what you meant by that? Obviously you have a benchmark against which you're comparing. How do you think we ended up there, and do you feel you've sort of addressed it now?
I'm very proud to say that through COVID, we never laid off anyone. We never have, and it's not the culture of Cinnamon, and it's not the culture of John Keel's. There has been natural attrition, and we have, continued to hire in certain positions. You can't sort of downsize just by attrition, because it depends on where it's going from, or where it's going from. But I think that it's the way in which we do things and understanding multitasking specifically. For example, restaurant operations, that we make sure that everybody does everything, that everybody facilitates. Not to say that they're not, but it's like sticking to a structure that there is control within that restaurant, and so you get the best output and best understanding. I think there has perhaps been a point of let's throw people at it. Right. And then it'll be good. Okay, we need to make sure that we clear the tables in a restaurant, as an example. Well, we don't have enough, so let's just throw more people at it. I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. And it just becomes cluttered, and it doesn't become efficient, and the deliverable is not good. That's not what luxury is today. Right? Luxury is a lot more simpler. It's a lot more slick. It's a lot more active. That's what people are looking for. So I think we were a little bit behind the 8 ball there over time, and I'm not really sure how that has happened. But perhaps there hasn't been huge influx of tourism here either. So the pressure of evolution within hospitality maybe hasn't been as strong as, say, India, for example, where you've seen a huge transition. That was the case in India back in the early 2000s. Exactly the same. If you go there now today, you would see a different type of operation altogether.
What's your assessment of this? Is it leadership culture? Is it work culture in general in Sri Lanka? You've had some time to sort of observe this and maybe try to change it. What's your reflection on that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. It has to start with leadership. There is definitely a sense of that culture in leadership. But I think that's, again, come over time. They haven't known any different. I think that I'm pleasantly surprised to see the change management within Cinnamon. In the beginning, when I arrived, there was great resistance to it because it was seen as a sense of saying, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get rid of people? Are you trying? But that's not the case at all. It's about creating other opportunities for people to do other things. So I think first and foremost, it is leadership. And that's going back to my point earlier about saying, do we have talent to deliver at the highest level in Sri Lanka? Yes, we do. But the leaders need to be able to take a very conscious responsibility towards delivering that great service and not just being in a position to facilitate a certain role, as it were. And I'm very proud to say that we've seen huge changes in Cinnamon and certainly Cinnamon Life. If you look at the kind of staff to room ratio, it's significantly lower than other properties you would see of that nature. It's in line with an international hotel, but certainly lower than the ratios you would see in traditional 5-star hotels.
Do you have a number off the top of your head that you can tell us about what those ratios were?
We're looking at between 1,500 to 1,700 staff to hire into Cinnamon Life, and we have 800 rooms and 22 restaurants and 4 ballrooms. That's a big monster. Right. So with 1,700 staff, 800 rooms, and that type of size, you're looking like 2 to 1 just on a room side, but a massive food and beverage offering. So that ratio, if you would bring it into certain properties and within Colombo specifically, you would see those ratios significantly higher.
Wow, that's very revealing.
Yes.
Yeah, 1,500 to 1,700 for 800 rooms, 22 restaurants, and how many ballrooms did you say?
3 ballrooms, 1 exhibition center.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's, we'll probably sit around the 1,700, just under 1,700 when we open. So, and, you could look at it and say, well, is that enough people? And yes, it is, because the manager has huge responsibilities. Those responsibilities also include being part of that operation from the lowest level to the highest level.
It also possibly means that your processes have to be that much stronger.
Absolutely.
And you probably have to use more tech so that people are aligned.
I was about to say, and that leads me to that point, is the tech, of course, is also a big part of advancing this philosophy of having less people. It's not just changing the way you operate in a department, but technology has to be embraced, and it's expected from the industry, but it's also expected from our guests.
At the beginning of this conversation, Mikael, you said you have both hands full because you are the general manager. You're delivering a product and a service across a group of hotels, a chain of hotels. The company you work for is also the owner of all these properties.
Yes, that's right.
So it's also a real estate business around
Yes.
which you have to then start thinking, okay, are we getting enough return on our assets? Are we getting enough return on the investment, the equity? When you look at your major KPIs around these two areas, what would those be, you think?
Look, I think in the end of the day, first of all, the way that I ensure that we manage this the best is to have two hats on. And the way that we run all of our properties, of which we own most of them, is we have management agreements set up within the organization so that our general managers and the leadership and myself can look at it from a perspective of how are we doing as a management company. Sure. And that will help us evolve into light asset, into management, into the future, because you can't facilitate just keep owning assets. So that side of things, for me, those KPIs are very clear, being performance of top line performance of your EBITDA and your GOP levels, and ensuring that we reach those targets, and also the service deliverables from our guest perspective, be it TripAdvisor or Review Pro or all those other aspects and elements. And the third one being our staff. A great place to work is one of the big KPIs that we use to ensure that. So that's all management related. When I come from management companies, that's what you look at, right? The performance of your property, the performance of your guests, so to speak, what they think of you, and what your staff think of you. Then when it comes to the owner side, it's really about looking at how much revenue am I getting per square foot, and what am I using and doing with the property at hand, and how best can we facilitate and not necessarily squeeze, because when you're in the 5-star business, you're not trying to make money off every single corner, but being smart about it and seeing where do you want to invest, how do you want to invest, where do you want to invest to improve your product, and what will those results look like, and not just focusing on delivering on the investments that have been put in. So it's quite different.
Talking about Cinnamon Life, the big resort that you just mentioned a little while ago, 22 restaurants, 800 rooms, 3 ballrooms, and so much more on offer. The yield that you can achieve, the average revenue per available room, not necessarily for a room occupied.
Yes.
May be something you have to sort of deal with. And I'm assuming the number that you target will be very different to the rest of your properties in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Right? I'm sure that must be challenging in some way, because you have to look at like two very completely different products. Deliver a yield of X here and a completely different yield on something else.
Yes.
How are you approaching that?
Actually, when you look at the yield, it's not necessarily different from a bottom line perspective. Because you need to make sure that your hotels are well balanced, right? What are you selling at? What's your cost structure? How number of people do you have? And how is that flow through down to your EBITDA? Those parameters remain the same, whether it be for Cinnamon Life or whether it be for Echelon for that matter. The difference is on how you get there. And I think with Cinnamon Life, the exciting challenge is that this is something that the country hasn't seen. This is not just very unique to Sri Lanka. I've been in many, many countries, and I can say like this, that when the day that Cinnamon Life opens, it will be the biggest opening of a hotel in the world. That's for sure. That's quite a big statement, but I believe it. So in other words, that property on that day is the biggest opening of a property of that size and caliber. So we need to make sure that how do we, in the context of Sri Lanka, promote this, because as you say, we have different, not necessarily yield percentages, but expectations on the top, because our cost structure within this very large property is extremely high. And so therefore, the challenge remains, how do we ensure that we drive that kind of business when it doesn't currently exist in Sri Lanka, right? It doesn't exist at this time. Obviously, we have a lot of bells and whistles. We have an amazing, exciting casino coming up, very exciting mall and exhibition centers and restaurants and so forth and so on. But so we will have a differentiation point. But we are dealing with competing on a world stage, not on a Sri Lanka stage. We're not looking at competing with Cinnamon Grand. We are looking at competing with Marina Bay Sands. That's the reality of our success.
And how are you preparing for this? How well do you think are your preparations going for this? Because you may have to think about marketing positioning from today, right? You're about a year away from opening?
About a year away, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So maybe something you're thinking about even today, right? Because
I think I thought about that 4 years ago.
Okay, right. So what's challenging about that, Mikael, from where you are?
The challenging thing is, look, you first and foremost, you must have the right people around you, to ensure that you can deliver on this. We have phenomenal people in commercial that have done this before, phenomenal people heading up the property that have done this before on this scale. Obviously, my own involvement is day to day. 90% of having to try to find in my day is very much surrounded around Cinnamon Life. We have a very, very specific and defined commercial marketing plan, which we're literally now starting to roll out, and will continue to grow. We have international agencies that have done this before on the larger scale. And we have some solid funding to support what we need to do. So I think a combination of all of those things and a very good, strong plan that I believe in is what's going to get us there. There's no doubt about it.
So I'm curious, you have 800 rooms to fill, the convention center. Your casino will not open on day one, but I think it'll join the offering several months.
A little bit later. Yeah.
A little bit later. Who is your target audience for Cinnamon Life in the early stages of this project?
I mean, obviously, our neighbors, India, is important, with or without a casino. They're a big market for us. Also, MICE is critically important, right? And I think we have an opportunity here because, and I'm sure having interviewed and know the industry relatively well, I'm sure that MICE is something that everybody keeps talking about, and we don't necessarily have the infrastructure to facilitate that. That's why we went ahead and built 3 ballrooms that we can take in over 5,000 people into Cinnamon Life. So that is a critical aspect with or without casino, having that part of it. Then also having the ability to have an infrastructure that has something to offer in Colombo, and not only somebody coming to go in down south or a round trip. Imagine, we have, I think, about 30%, 35% maybe of all arrivals that would stay a night in Colombo, a little bit more, a little bit less. But if you do this and you just grab, 50%, 60% of everybody that arrives staying one day, just with your current market that's here, that's already, a big chunk. So that leisure side of things from that perspective, but also for people that want to come and experience property, right? We talked earlier about traveling for property. A lot of people do. A lot of people travel to go specifically to Marina Bay Sands, right?
Absolutely.
And that's our responsibility, that people will travel specifically to come to experience Cinnamon Life. So the MICE aspect of it, the leisure aspect of having more people coming through Colombo, for one night or 2 nights. And then obviously the corporate environment, which is only set to grow as the Colombo comes back. A business environment is going to want to grow. And, we believe that obviously corporates at the highest level are going to choose Cinnamon Life as the choice hotel to stay in.
Do you think the Sri Lankan product overall, if you take your 800 rooms and you turn them around every 3 days or something like that, right? At one time you have 1,000 people, 1,200 people staying in your hotel on a day, and you need to turn that around every 3 days. look at the inbound air traffic capacity that you need to add to Sri Lanka's small total, right? It's a significant number. Do you think the rest of the product is shaping up in the same way that you are, to match your ambition right now?
How do you mean? In what?
So will we have enough capacity on airlines?
Yeah, to fill that property.
800 rooms, which you need to turn around every 3 days, something like that.
Yeah, I think there may be a challenge, especially in airlift, and how quickly that ramps up. Not to necessarily fill Cinnamon Life, but Colombo as a whole, right? So, and we also have 3 other properties with Cinnamon Red, slightly different target market, but we have Cinnamon Grand and Cinnamon Lakeside, which, accounts for more than 800 rooms between them as well. So we have a big chunk of the market, in Colombo. As a property, I think that's not going to be as big a challenge as we believe, but it is because we believe, having the piece, a chunk of how big of a piece of the pie you're going to be able to have. And with a new product in a city that doesn't have new hotels coming all the time, there's a new excitement that comes with that. So I think and then ITC will be open up shortly as well, and we'll also have that kind of new and improved type of a product, as did Shang years ago. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. Where we may find challenges, though, is that, and I think it's a good challenge, is that we will begin to define a true 5-star market and a true 4-star market and a true 3-star market. And that's where we've had challenges in the past. And, with the minimum rate coming in now, it really is because, many of the hotels have morphed into one, right? So we are, because of demand, we have been a rate-driven market, a rate-driven city, and not a product-driven city. That will change. Shangri-La is a product-driven property, and you can see that with their business. So I think with the addition of these new hotels, and as I said in the beginning, realigning your current property, because you have to, finding your own niche, we'll be able to all have hopefully a healthy piece of the pie, but there will need to be additional airlift, and we need to have another terminal, and we need to get the infrastructure up, because all of those support aspects are necessary for the industry, for the hotel industry and tourism, to strive in Colombo. It's very necessary.
Mikael, this has been a wonderful chat. Is there anything you feel you need to add to complete it?
I really appreciate that your questions have been geared very much towards what you need to do to change your product to attract the guest. And I think that's, for us, that's the biggest thing. We are all about aligning our brand and building on the expectations of what our guests want in each and every property. We're on an exciting journey to do so, and believe we will. And I really hope that other hotels and hotel brands do the same. I think the last thing I would like to say is, I think that what is the need of the hour right now is that we as an industry need to work cohesively together. This is not about us throwing out a campaign into the world and saying we're going to get people in because we have a campaign of X million dollars. It's not about us having some kind of an initiative for the country, or saying that we are everything for everybody, or a good tagline. That's not going to be the success of the rebuild and the rebound of Sri Lanka. I also think we need to realize that when we look back at 1819, when we had a 2.2 million arrivals, and we often use this as a benchmark of saying, but that's not a benchmark of success to a country. 2.2 million is not enough. And we need to understand that we need to be at 5 million or thereabouts to be a successful country, like you can see in Vietnam, how they moved in the early mid-2000s into where they are today. And we need to realize this early, because with 5 million people comes infrastructure, comes hotels, comes experiences, all of these aspects that we have to, that's not going to come with a campaign. That has to happen now, because it's going to come very, very fast. And that's why we believe Cinnamon Life is that, that is a tangible asset that we are bringing to our group, yes, but we're bringing it to Colombo, we're bringing it to Sri Lanka. We know this is going to put Sri Lanka further on the map as an international city and country. And so everybody needs to take that responsibility. We certainly do. And I think on top of that, we need to make sure that every brand that's there is proactively going out and promoting their brand, and as such promoting Sri Lanka. That's not going to happen from here. It's not going to happen by going to a couple of trade shows. It is about creating, alliances with partners. It's about going out there. It's about being at the, letting people around the world know what Sri Lanka is through their own brands, through their own budgets, through their own means and needs. But I think we have to get off this thinking that you go to the big trade shows and that's how you're going to get tourism. That's, in my opinion, we need a lot more than that from all of us, including us, to ensure that Sri Lanka will thrive in the future.
Mikael Svensson, wonderful chat.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was great.